Hey! Happy Halloween! We got our cups of chai tea and water. And we're to talk about scary movies. So we thought it might be fun, considering that it's the time of year people like to watch spooky stuff, to talk about what scares us in movies. Ooh, this should be interesting because I am a pretty big fan of horror movies. You are not?
I like, well,
people blame the movie Saw for starting this kind of era of torture porn where it's just nothing but watching gross, violent imagery, which I agree with. There are quite a few of those out there, but I don't think that's the biggest problem with horror today. For one thing, gore has been around for a long time, and graphic violence in movies, in horror movies, can work depending on the way you use it. I think one of the most famous classic uses of graphic violence in a horror movie that's used effectively was in John Carpenter's The Thing. The whole premise is there's a thing, an alien monster, and what it does is it takes over your body and mimics you, essentially. It becomes you, and so the whole plot is they're not sure who is the monster, but when it reveals itself, it like morphs into these giant body monstrosities that are really terrifying because it's people morphing into these big monster things. And that's a movie where it works really well because it's unexpected. It's
You gotta be f***ing kidding.
A lot of these modern horror movies like to take violence and say, look, we're gonna show something terrible happening to somebody. That's scary. And I'm like, that's not scary. You're making me want to cover my eyes, not because I'm scared, but because I'm grossed out.
yeah, that tends to be one of the problems I have with zombie movies, why I don't like zombie movies, even like silly ones, just because zombies gross me out and I don't like to look at them. So if you tell me I have to sit there for an hour and a half and watch like gross, drippy monsters, it's not because I'm scared that I don't want to watch it, it's because I just don't want to be sitting there eating popcorn like, his eyeball fell out.
You need to build a good movie around your violence if you want to make a good scary movie. You see this all the time in these paranormal, supernatural ghost movies today, where the white noise gets down really, really quiet. There's a jump scare. I watched the movie Insidious Chapter 3 recently, and I kid you not, in the first maybe half hour, there's between 5 and 10 jump scares. And it's real spooky stuff happening, but when you use jump scares that often, the audience isn't going to be scared anymore.
But we see it so much, like, when it's coming.
And they telegraph the scares from so far away. As well. I mean, again, the fact that you're anticipating it, the audience, they're cringing in their seats because they know a jump scare is coming. They're not cringing in their seats because they're genuinely frightened. They're just anticipating a jump scare. And once that happens, then they can breathe and say, all right, well, at least that's over now.
Maggie? Maggie?
In the making of documentary for Jaws, Steven Spielberg was talking about how they were doing early screenings of the movie right after he made it, and there was a scene where Roy Scheider is shoveling chum into the water.
I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit.
And Steven Spielberg said in early screenings, people jumped and they screamed at that moment, and he thought, wow, this is great. And then he thought a little bit more, and he said, you know what? I bet I can get one more scare out of these people.
And it made me greedy. I got so greedy. Because earlier in the movie, when they find Ben Gardner's head in the boat, I hadn't timed it right. I said, there's one more scream we can get in this movie I can figure out this thing with Ben Gardner's head.
So what he did was he went back, re-edited that part with the severed head, to with the music and the timing, and he got it just perfect. And on subsequent screenings, people jumped, he said, even higher at that moment. But they didn't jump as high during the chum scene anymore because the audience didn't trust him. And so it goes to show, when you start throwing too many jump scares into a movie, your movie starts losing its edge. And it just becomes about, when is the next jump scare going to happen? Sometimes the scariest things aren't the stuff that we know. Sometimes it's the things that we unknow. The unknown. Stanley Kubrick's The Shining is known as one of the greatest horror films of all time. But the film is known as a very frightening movie because it makes you feel uneasy because of the atmosphere it builds around this hotel. There's so much mystery and history behind this hotel that when this crazy stuff starts happening and this kid is revealed to have these kind of psychic powers, you don't know what's going on, but it's scaring the shit out of you.
I'm going to talk about Star Trek for a minute. When we first meet the Borg in Next Generation, they are so freaking scary. You have no idea where they came from. You don't know how many of them they are. You don't know what their motivation is. They just come and they don't stop, and you kill one and another one gets up and keeps coming. It's really scary. But then later on they introduce the Borg Queen, and then it's not so scary anymore. Because now we know, oh, there's a queen. If you kill the queen, you can kill all the Borg. The queen's kind of the driving force. Because we know what the driving force is, it just loses that element of mystery, which made it so scary. And that brings me to another point about something that's really scary is when things that are innocent and familiar all of a sudden get a dark twist. Doctor Who does this all the time in their scary episodes. They have marionettes, they have automatons, and they're all really scary. And then in The Visit, what if your grandparents go crazy? And that's one of the reasons that movie works so well, because in the beginning, they're so nice. They're making you cookies, and they're just these really sweet old couple, and then they just get weirder and weirder throughout. So if you add a little bit of a scary twist, that makes us really uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. Three horror movie villains that do frighten me. Hannibal Lecter from Silence of the Lambs, Jack Torrance from The Shining, and the Preacher from Night of the Hunter. And the reason these kind of villains scare me is because they are outlandish, they are exaggerated, they are a little bit over the top, but they're grounded in a sense of reality that I feel like I could meet this person in real life. Jack Torrance, he's just a dad that went psycho. Yeah, all this ghostly stuff is happening around him, but the fact that you learn so much about him at the beginning of the film, and then as he slowly digresses, it just brings chills down your spine. I think this is just a family man who wants to murder his family with an axe. The most prime example of this we have is the Preacher from Night of the Hunter. He's terrorizing children in this movie. Mm-hmm. He is the most exaggerated character in a movie full of mostly normal people.
Yeah, and it goes along with the same lines as the familiar thing that's off. These are people that kids are supposed to trust. So, your dad, you're supposed to trust your dad. Your preacher, you're supposed to trust your preacher. That's part of what makes it so scary, is that these guys are totally whacked, but they're the people in the lives of these kids that they're supposed to be able to trust.
And so while a lot of these other movie monsters, they do work for their movies. Friday the 13th, I love Friday the 13th. I wouldn't put Freddy Krueger as one of the most frightening villains for me, though, because I can't really connect him to anything that feels like it would fit in the real world to me. Which doesn't mean he can't be scary. It just means that for me, it connects in a much more frightening way if I can ground it in some sort of reality.
To be frightened by a movie monster, you have to care about somebody. A really great example is Night of the Hunter, in how the hero and the villain contrast. They're basically two sides of the same coin. There's this wonderful scene where they're both singing.
Lean on Jesus.
And you see this contrast between this hypocritical Christianity and this sincere Christianity, and sort of this battle between good and evil. And because we have such a powerful hero in Mrs. Cooper, this grouchy little old lady who's yet so sincere and so true, it just makes her triumph over him all the better.
Shame on you, Ruby.
To make a great scary movie, you need to have relatable characters, you need to have a scary villain that we can relate to.
That we can believe is real.
We need to have either a sense of the unknown or a sense of the familiar, or mix the two into one, preferably. If you want to get a really good scary movie, take something familiar and add a sense of the unknown into it. Don't overuse jump scares. And don't rely on violence for your scares only. Use violence if you need to, but don't rely on violence.
Joe, what are you
for your
telling
scares.
people?
So I'm going to propose my ultimate scary movie that I think utilizes all of these elements. Now, it's not the scariest movie I've ever seen, but it is a very effective movie. And that is Wait Until Dark, with Audrey Hepburn and Alan Arkin, which we both have seen. The hero, Audrey Hepburn, right from the get-go, she's blind, living in an apartment by herself. So already you have an underdog character that you care about. Then on the opposite end, you have our villain, played by Alan Arkin, who is a drug-crazed psychopath who wears sunglasses indoors.
Never trust people who wear sunglasses indoors.
They build up the tension really, really, really well in this movie. The film slowly builds it up bit by bit. They do use a jump scare at one point in this movie, and it's probably one of the most famous jump scares in movie history. It's unexpected, it's frightening, and most importantly, the tension hasn't been deflated after the scare. So that's why I propose this Halloween, check out Wait Until Dark if you haven't, and take us a little history on thrillers. That one's not really a horror movie, but it works for this time of year.
Scary.
It's a scary little movie, and you can watch it with your girlfriend.
You can actually watch it. You can pretty much watch that with even kids if you wanted to, maybe.
Bring the whole family.
Well, not small kids,
Watch
but
Wait Until Dark.
there's nothing like horrific in it that's.
Watch Alan Arkin with a butcher knife chasing after a blind lady.
There's like no gratuitous gore in it.
So that's our little Halloween video. What'd you think? Let us know in the comments. If you have something nice to say. If you don't have anything nice to say, then shut up.
Joe, why did you put a video on the internet if you didn't want, if you only wanted to ever hear nice things about yourself?
This is the internet. You guys can be nice, right? Also tell us what scares you. What are some things that we left out? Obviously, we couldn't cover everything in this video. So tell us what do you guys find really effective in movies? Do you think we got some stuff wrong? If so, correct us and be mean to us in the comments.
And tell us what your favorite scary movie or TV show is also.